Sunday dinner at my house was more than just a meal. It was a sacred ritual, a weekly anchor in the turbulent waters of modern life. The scent of roasted chicken and simmering herbs usually filled the air with comfort, a promise of warmth and togetherness. This particular Sunday, however, a different kind of tension simmered beneath the surface. Unnoticed by my son Liam, Serena's husband, or even Arthur, my younger son. But I felt it. I had been feeling it for months, a low hum of deceit that had slowly crescendoed into an unbearable frequency. The table was set meticulously, as always, with my grandmother's heirloom china. Liam sat across from me, his kind eyes focused on carving the chicken, completely oblivious to the impending storm. Beside him, Serena, his wife, looked radiant, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light. Arthur, seated next to Serena, kept his gaze fixed on his plate, a nervous energy radiating from him that I, his mother, knew all too well. We were mid-meal, the polite chatter a thin veil over unspoken anxieties, when Serena placed a crisp, cream-colored envelope beside my plate. Her smile was too wide, too triumphant. "Ellie," she purred, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I thought you might appreciate these. You always did say you were good at noticing details, but I guess some things are just too big for even you to pick up on. Or perhaps," she added, her eyes glinting with malice, "you're simply too stupid to notice." My heart hammered, a drumbeat of anticipation rather than fear. I took a slow sip of water, feigning a tremor in my hand as I reached for the envelope. Inside were glossy photographs, professionally shot, almost artfully arranged. Each one depicted Serena and Arthur, not as in-laws or friends, but as lovers, kissing under a Tuscan sun, wrapped in an embrace on a secluded beach, their bodies intimately entwined in various luxurious settings. The images were undeniably clear, undeniably damning. I let out a gasp, perfectly timed, perfectly theatrical. Liam's head snapped up, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Arthur, who had been avoiding my gaze all evening, finally looked up, his face draining of all color, his lips parting in a silent plea. My performance was convincing enough. Liam's confusion was genuine, a painful contrast to Arthur's palpable terror. Serena watched me, a cruel satisfaction dancing in her eyes. "There's no need to pretend, Ellie," she announced, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "The truth is out. Arthur and I are in love. We have been for months." Her gaze swept between Liam and Arthur, a brazen challenge in her posture. "Isn't that right, my love?" she cooed, reaching out to caress Arthur's trembling hand. Liam dropped the carving knife onto the platter with a clatter. "What are you talking about, Serena?" His voice was low, dangerous, a stark contrast to his usual gentle demeanor. "What is this? Some kind of sick joke?" He looked from Serena to Arthur, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Arthur tried to speak, a jumble of excuses and apologies threatening to spill forth, but Serena cut him off with a sharp glare. "It's no joke, Liam. It's reality. Arthur and I belong together. You were just a convenient stepping stone." I felt a surge of cold fury, but I kept my face carefully blank, my feigned shock holding firm. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a perfect imitation of a shattered mother. Inside, I already knew the answer, or at least a closer approximation than she would ever admit. Serena paused, her eyes narrowing as if calculating. "About 6 months, she finally declared, a smug expression returning to her face. I knew it was longer, much longer, but I simply nodded, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. I suddenly don't feel so well," I stammered, clutching my stomach. "I think I need a moment." I pushed back my chair with a shaky hand and retreated to the kitchen, leaving the dining room door ajar just enough for the acoustics to work their magic. I leaned against the cold marble counter, my ear straining to catch every word. 6 months, Serena?" Liam's voice was filled with raw anguish. "We've been married for 3 years. What about our life? Our plans?" Serena's laugh was chillingly dismissive. "Our life was a bore, Liam. Our plans were mundane. I deserve more. Arthur gives me passion, excitement. He understands me in a way you never could. Then her voice dropped, becoming an insidious hiss. And besides, if you try to make trouble, I'm sure Arthur wouldn't want certain, questionable deals he's been involved in to come to light, would he? A heavy silence followed, thick with implied threats and unspoken fear. Arthur's involvement in shady dealings was news to Liam, but not to me. I had kept my ear to the ground for months, gathering pieces, connecting dots. My plan was nearly complete. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the kitchen door open and walked back into the dining room, my steps slow and deliberate. Liam looked up, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. Arthur was slumped in his chair, defeated. Serena, however, was preening, confident in her victory. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, the screen already illuminated. I held it up, facing Serena. "Before you go, Serena," I said, my voice now calm, devoid of any feigned emotion. "I just wanted to share something interesting I noticed. You see, I also have some photographs." On the screen was a clear image of Serena, laughing, her arm wrapped around a handsome man with dark, intense eyes. They were standing on a sun-drenched beach, not a candid shot, but a posed, loving portrait. "This is Marcus Thompson, isn't it, Serena?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. Serena's confident smirk wavered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then alarm. Who is that?" she stammered, but her eyes betrayed her. "Oh, come now," I said softly, scrolling to the next photo. "Don't tell me you don't recognize your own husband." Her wineglass, still in her hand, slipped from her grasp and shattered on the polished floor, sending shards of crystal scattering. "That's impossible," she whispered, her face ashen. Marcus is dead. He died years ago." I scrolled again, displaying a marriage certificate, clear and undeniable. "No, Serena," I corrected gently. "Marcus Thompson is very much alive, and, as this document shows, he is legally married to you. Has been for 3 years, in fact." My gaze swept to Liam, then Arthur, allowing the revelation to sink in. "Which, if my memory serves me right, means you were married to Marcus when you married Liam. And you're still married to him now." The color drained from Serena's face entirely. Her eyes rolled back, and before anyone could react, she collapsed onto the floor in a dead faint. A deep, cold satisfaction settled in my chest. The game, I knew, was just beginning. The unraveling began 3 months before that fateful Sunday dinner. Not with a bang, but with a silent buzz. I was in the utility room, methodically folding Arthur's shirts, the mundane rhythm of domesticity a comforting hum. Arthur was in the shower, the distant sound of running water a familiar backdrop to my afternoon. His phone, lying on the washing machine, vibrated softly, illuminating the screen with a new message notification. I usually paid no mind to his phone, trusting him implicitly after 4 decades of shared life. But something, perhaps a subtle shift in the light, or an instinct honed over years, made me glance at it. The lock screen displayed a message preview, stark and undeniable. From S. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again." My breath hitched. The neatly folded shirt slipped from my hands, landing softly on the clean pile. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. 42 years of unwavering trust, of building a life, a family, a home. In that instant, it all felt like a fragile glass sculpture, suddenly dropped and shattered into irreparable pieces. My mind raced, trying to grasp at any other explanation. Who else could it be? Serena. My daughter-in-law, my son Liam's wife, the woman who had shared our family table, our holidays, our lives. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Could only be Serena. And the message left no room for innocent interpretation. A lifetime of instinct kicked in. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Arthur would be out of the shower any moment. I had to act, and I had to act quickly, without betraying the seismic shift that had just occurred within me. "Arthur," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "You forgot your phone, dear. It keeps buzzing." As if on cue, the water stopped running. I picked up the phone, my fingers brushing against the cool glass. My mind worked with ruthless efficiency. His password. What could it be? Our anniversary. It had to be. He was sentimental about things like that. A long shot. But worth trying. With trembling hands, I input the date. A soft click, and the screen unlocked. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, as I delved into his messages. What I found was a sickening tapestry of deceit, months, not weeks, of intimate exchanges with Serena, messages detailing secret rendezvous, explicit desires, and, most painfully, degrading comments about me, his wife, the old woman, past her prime, a burden. Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound of betrayal. There were photos, too. Not just the stolen moments I would later see on Sunday, but selfies, intimate close-ups, sent back and forth, painting a graphic picture of their sordid affair. But amidst the emotional wreckage, a single detail caught my eye. A tiny, pixelated screenshot sent from Serena. It was blurry, distorted, but clear enough to make out the words, marriage certificate, and two names. Serena and Marcus Thompson. My mind, reeling from the personal affront, latched onto this anomaly. Why would Serena send Arthur a screenshot of a marriage certificate? And who was Marcus Thompson? A new layer of deception began to peel away, revealing an even more complex web of lies. My fingers flew across the screen, a surge of adrenaline propelling me. I screenshot the image, ensuring I had a copy, however poor the quality. Just as I finished, I heard Arthur's footsteps approaching. He walked into the utility room, a towel wrapped around his waist, a gentle smile on his face. "Thanks, Ellie," he said, taking the phone from my hand. "I always forget it." He kissed my cheek. Oblivious to the storm raging behind my eyes, oblivious to the secret I now held in the palm of my hand, I returned his smile, a mask of composure firmly in place, even as my world crumbled. The next morning, Serena arrived, as she often did, for coffee and a chat. The house was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed Colombian roast. She sat at my kitchen island, bright and cheerful, completely unaware that her secret life was hanging by a thread. I, on the other hand, felt a strange calm, a steely resolve settling over me. The shock had given way to a quiet determination. "Coffee?" I offered, pouring her a cup, my movements slow and deliberate. "Cream. 2 sugars. Just how you like it." "Perfect, Ellie, thank you," she chirped, taking the mug. I watched her, my gaze seemingly casual. "You know, Serena," I began, my voice light, as if making idle conversation. "I was looking through some old photo albums the other day. It got me thinking about weddings. Such a special time, isn't it?" She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "Oh, absolutely. Liam and I had such a lovely day." "Yes, you did," I agreed, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Though I suppose every wedding is special in its own way. You know, you never really talk much about your first wedding. To Marcus, wasn't it?" I paused, letting the name hang in the air, a silent bomb. "I'd love to see photos sometime. You must have some wonderful memories." Even if it ended sadly, the effect was instantaneous and dramatic. The porcelain mug slipped from Serena's grasp, clattering onto the tiled floor. Coffee splattered, dark brown liquid spreading across the pristine white, mingling with the shattered shards of ceramic. Her face, moments ago so vibrant, turned ashen, pure terror flashing in her eyes. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. "Oh dear, Serena," I exclaimed, feigning concern, though a quiet triumph sang in my heart. "Are you all right? You look as though you've seen a ghost." She quickly composed herself, her hands trembling as she bent to pick up a piece of the broken mug. "I'm fine, Ellie," she stammered, her voice thin. "Just startled. It's just Marcus. It's a very painful subject, you see. He died in a car accident a few years ago. Such a tragedy. I don't really like to look at the photos. It brings back too much grief." She met my gaze, a desperate plea for me to believe her. I nodded slowly, my expression sympathetic. Of course, dear. I understand completely. My apologies for bringing it up. I moved to retrieve the dustpan and brush. As I knelt to clean the mess, carefully sweeping up the shattered pieces, I knew, with absolute certainty, that she was lying. The terror in her eyes, the sudden clumsiness, the hastily constructed story. It was all too telling. Marcus Thompson wasn't just a painful memory. He was a secret. And secrets, I mused, as I gathered the last shard, were meant to be exposed. My next move was already taking shape in my mind. The shattered coffee mug and Serena's frantic lie about a deceased Marcus solidified my resolve. I had always been a woman of action, not one to wallow in despair. That very afternoon, I made a discreet call. Within hours, I was sitting in the dimly lit office of Detective Alan Miller, a private investigator known for his discretion and tenacious pursuit of the truth. He was a man of few words, his weathered face etched with years of witnessing human folly, his eyes sharp and assessing. I laid out the situation, choosing my words carefully, revealing only what was necessary to initiate the investigation. I recounted the suspicious text message, the explicit photos I had seen on Arthur's phone, and Serena's sudden terror when I mentioned Marcus. I explained that she was Liam's wife, my daughter-in-law, and that I suspected she was involved in something far more sinister than a simple affair. My main objective, I told him, was to verify the existence, and more importantly, the alleged death, of a man named Marcus Thorne. I handed him the blurry screenshot of the marriage certificate I had captured from Arthur's phone, the only tangible clue I possessed. Detective Miller listened patiently, his gaze unwavering, occasionally jotting down notes in a small spiral-bound pad. He asked pointed questions, precise and efficient, extracting every pertinent detail without emotion. By the end of our conversation, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that I had placed my trust in the right hands. He assured me he would be in touch with his preliminary findings within a few weeks. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Detective Miller. His voice was calm, almost detached, but the words he spoke sent a shiver down my spine. "Mrs. Vance," he began, "I have some preliminary findings regarding your daughter-in-law, Serena, and the man you referred to as Marcus Thorne, and," I urged, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. "Well, first off," he stated matter-of-factly, "his name isn't Marcus, it's Julian Thorne, and he is very much alive." My breath caught in my throat. Alive, so my instincts had been correct. He's currently residing in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is, by all legal accounts, still married to Serena. The confirmation hung in the air, a chilling testament to Serena's audacious deception. "So, she's a bigamist," I whispered, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Precisely," Detective Miller confirmed. "Serena married Liam Vance while still legally wed to Julian Thorne. That makes your son Liam, unfortunately, a victim of her fraud as well." He then proceeded to paint a portrait of Serena that was far more disturbing than I could have ever imagined. She wasn't just a bigamist. She was a serial con artist. Serena, or rather, one of her many aliases, Miller continued, has a rather consistent pattern of operation. She targets older, often wealthy, and usually married men. She seduces them, weaves a elaborate tale of being a grieving widow with some vague, tragic past. And then, once she has access to their finances, she disappears, leaving them financially ruined. Julian Thorne, he explained, was a prime example. Mr. Thorne lost his house, his entire life savings, and his small but successful business, all thanks to Serena. She drained his accounts, liquidated his assets, and vanished, leaving him with nothing but debt and a broken heart. "And her other aliases?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "We found records for Elizabeth Margaret Sawyer, Emily Morrison, and Emma Daniels, all claiming to be widows, all with different backstories, but all with the same M.O." Miller revealed. "She's a chameleon, Mrs. Vance, adapting her persona to fit her prey. She's very good at it." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Serena wasn't just a homewrecker, she was a predator. And the Vance family, now, was her latest target. Do you think she has something bigger planned for us? I asked, a tremor in my voice. Given the financial information she's been subtly gathering on the Vance family assets, particularly those of Mr. Arthur Vance, it's highly probable, Miller replied. She's not just playing for love, Mrs. Vance. She's playing for the long game. And a substantial payoff. Then, he dropped another bombshell. Julian Thorne has been actively looking for Serena, Mrs. Vance. He wants to press charges: fraud, bigamy, grand theft. He's been in contact with authorities in Arizona, but she's been adept at evading them. We've also located a few other victims who are more than willing to testify against her. Your family isn't the first, nor would it be the last, if she isn't stopped. Detective Miller then sent me a photo of Julian Thorne, a kind-faced man in his late 50s, his eyes carrying a deep sadness, a testament to the pain Serena had inflicted. Looking at his face, a sudden clarity washed over me. Julian wasn't just another victim. He was a key, a crucial piece in the intricate puzzle I was assembling. He had the motivation, the evidence, and the legal standing to truly expose Serena and bring her reign of terror to an end. Detective Miller, I said, my voice firm and resolute. I need you to arrange a meeting. I need to speak with Julian Thorne. As soon as possible. The game had escalated, and I needed allies. Julian Thorne was my first. The meeting with Julian Thorne was arranged swiftly, a testament to Detective Miller's efficiency. 2 days after our conversation, I found myself in a quiet corner of a bustling downtown coffee shop, observing the man Miller had identified as Serena's first husband. Julian sat alone at a small table, nursing a cooling cup of coffee, his gaze distant, haunted. He was exactly as I had seen him in the photograph. A kind-faced man, now etched with the deep lines of sorrow and betrayal. He looked utterly broken, a shadow of the man he once must have been. When I approached, he looked up, startled, his eyes blinking in confusion. Julian Thorne? I asked softly, extending my hand. I'm Ellie Vance. A flicker of recognition, then apprehension, crossed his face as he took my hand. Mrs. Vance, he murmured, his voice raspy. Detective Miller said you'd be contacting me. Please, call me Ellie, I insisted, taking the seat opposite him. I know this isn't easy, but I believe we have a common enemy, and I believe that together, we can stop her. A faint spark, almost imperceptible, ignited in his weary eyes. Hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was there. Julian began to speak, his voice gaining a hesitant strength as he recounted his story. He knew her as Emma. She came into my life like a breath of fresh air, he recalled, his gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the window. A grieving widow, she said, having lost her husband tragically. She was so kind, so understanding. She made me feel alive again. After my own wife passed, his voice cracked, and he paused, taking a ragged breath. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about me. She moved in quickly, became indispensable. He described how Emma, Serena, had meticulously, almost imperceptibly, taken over every aspect of his life. She managed his finances, helping him invest, advising him on his business. Each decision, each signature, was rationalized with a sweet smile and a plausible explanation, all designed to benefit him, she claimed. I never suspected a thing, Julian confessed, a raw pain in his voice. She had me completely fooled. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. She had drained my accounts, mortgaged my house to the hilt, and liquidated my business assets. Then, one morning, she was just gone, along with every penny I had. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I tried to go to the police, but she had been so clever. I had willingly signed everything. It was all legal, on paper. They told me it was a civil matter, a bad investment, a divorce without the paperwork. They couldn't help me. His story resonated deeply, echoing the cunning I had already witnessed in Serena. The casual manipulation, the calculated charm, the ruthless execution. My initial anger towards Arthur and Serena began to solidify into a cold, strategic fury. This woman was not merely a cheating wife, she was a professional predator, leaving a trail of ruined lives in her wake. I reached across the table, covering his trembling hand with mine. "Julian," I said, my voice steady, filled with a resolve that surprised even myself. "What she did to you was criminal. What she's doing to my family, to my son Liam, is also criminal. We have information now, evidence that the police weren't privy to before. We know about her other identities, her other victims, her pattern. If we combine our resources, our knowledge, we can expose her. We can get justice." He looked at my hand, then at my eyes, searching for sincerity, for strength. He found it. The spark in his eyes grew, becoming a small flame. "You really think so?" he asked, a fragile hope blossoming in his voice. "I know so," I affirmed. "She's targeted the wrong family this time. We will stop her." Julian's shoulders, which had been slumped in defeat, straightened almost imperceptibly. He nodded, a slow, determined movement. "I'm in, Ellie. Whatever it takes." As I left the coffee shop, a sense of quiet power settled within me. For the first time since discovering Arthur's betrayal, since the initial shattering of my trust, I felt truly in control. I wasn't just reacting, I was strategizing, building an alliance. The game was indeed on, and I was playing to win. The next morning, the air in my home felt charged. I woke early, the plan solidifying in my mind. Arthur was in the kitchen, making his usual elaborate breakfast. The aroma of coffee and sizzling bacon filled the space, a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere between us. I walked in, my steps deliberate, my gaze fixed on him. He looked up, a nervous smile on his face, trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy. "Good morning, dear," he chirped, offering me a plate of pancakes. I ignored the plate, my voice cutting through the cheerful facade like a sharp knife. "Good morning, Arthur," I said, my tone flat, devoid of warmth. "Tell me, how long have you known her real name is Serena Albright Thorne?" The question hit him with the force of a physical blow. The spatula clattered from his hand, landing on the floor with a dull thud. His face, usually ruddy and flushed, drained of all color, turning an ashen gray. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with terror. What are you talking about, Ellie?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do," I countered, stepping closer, my voice gaining strength. "Serena Albright Thorne. Or perhaps you knew her as Emily Morrison, or Emma Daniels. My personal favorite, though, is her birth name. Her legal name, Elizabeth Margaret Sawyer. Which one of those aliases were you aware of, Arthur? And when exactly did you learn that your lover, my daughter-in-law, was not only a bigamist, but a serial con artist with a long list of victims?" Arthur's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. His eyes darted around the kitchen, as if searching for an escape, a hidden door to a reality where none of this was happening, but there was nowhere to run. The fear radiating from him was palpable, a chilling confirmation of his complicity, his knowledge, and his terror of exposure. The silence in the kitchen stretched, thick and suffocating. Arthur stood frozen, his face a canvas of utter defeat, his fear a tangible presence. I knew, with sickening certainty, that he had been aware of Serena's true nature, or at least parts of it. His desperate attempt to deny it was pathetic. My voice when I spoke again was sharper, laced with a steel I hadn't known I possessed. "Don't pretend, Arthur. Your face tells me everything. You knew. You've known something about her for a long time, haven't you?" His shoulders slumped, and he sagged against the counter, as if the weight of his guilt was physically crushing him. "Ellie, please," he choked out, tears welling in his eyes. "You don't understand. She was blackmailing me." Blackmail. The word hung in the air, heavy and dark. My initial shock quickly morphed into a cold, hard anger. "Blackmailing you?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "About what, Arthur? What could possibly be so terrible that you would sacrifice our son's happiness, our family's peace, to protect yourself. He looked up, his eyes pleading. The Henderson deal, he whispered, glancing around as if the walls themselves had ears. 20 years ago, Ellie. The property development. You remember, the irregularities, the Henderson deal. The name brought back a vague memory of a stressful period, whispers of legal troubles and close calls that Arthur had always brushed off as minor paperwork issues. Now, the truth began to emerge from the shadows of the past. Irregularities? I pressed, my voice devoid of sympathy. You mean fraud, bribery, Arthur? Did you cut corners? Did you break the law? He buried his face in his hands, a pathetic whimper escaping his lips. It was a gray area, Ellie. Everyone was doing it back then. I just got caught up. Roger Davies. He was my associate on the project. He had all the files, all the proof. I thought when he died last year, it was all buried with him. Arthur finally looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. But Serena, she somehow got her hands on them. All of it. Incriminating documents, bank transfers, recorded conversations, everything. My mind reeled, connecting the dots. Roger Davies, Arthur's old business partner, had indeed died suddenly just over a year ago. It was then that Serena had intensified her efforts to integrate herself into our family. So, she used those documents to force you into her scheme? I asked, my voice flat, betraying no emotion. To help her get close to Liam? To marry into our family for financial access? He nodded, a torrent of words finally spilling out. Yes, she said if I didn't cooperate, she would send everything to the authorities, expose me. My reputation, my legacy, everything would be destroyed. She knew how much I valued my position, my good name. He paused, taking a shuddering breath. She said she wanted to marry into the Vance family. She needed an insider to facilitate it. She wanted access to Liam's business, to his inheritance. She wanted a piece of everything. And I was too afraid to say no. My gaze hardened. And what about you sleeping with her, Arthur? I demanded. The thought making my stomach churn. Was that part of the blackmail too? Or was that just a little bonus for your cooperation? He flinched, his face contorting in shame. No. That wasn't part of the original plan, Ellie. I swear. She started coming on to me, making me feel desirable again. She said I was handsome, strong, that you didn't appreciate me anymore. She made me feel young again, Ellie. Like I had a spark. He looked genuinely distressed, as if the physical betrayal was a secondary, almost accidental, consequence of his greater weakness. It was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I hated myself for it, but she was so persistent. And I was so vulnerable. I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Or simply selfish. You chose to save your own skin, your good name, at the expense of our son. You watched her manipulate Liam. You allowed her to infiltrate our family, all to protect your dirty little secret. And you even allowed yourself to be seduced by her, validating her twisted game. He wrung his hands, his head shaking vehemently. No, Ellie. That's not it. I was trying to figure out a way to stop her, I swear. I was always looking for a way out. A way to get rid of her without exposing myself. She kept escalating her demands. She wasn't just after Liam's money. She wanted to be a partner in his business, to have control. She was becoming more brazen, more demanding. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything imploded. A way to stop her? I repeated, my voice dripping with scorn. Is that what you call it, Arthur? Because from where I'm standing, your solution involved getting into her bed and letting her walk all over our family. He broke down then, a guttural sob tearing from his chest. He sank to the floor, clutching his knees, weeping like a child. I'm so sorry, Ellie, he wailed. So sorry for everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. I looked down at him, my husband of 42 years, now a broken, sobbing mess at my feet. But there was no sympathy in me. Only a cold, hard resolve. "Get up, Arthur," I commanded, my voice flat, unwavering. "Self-pity won't help us now. You're going to help me stop her." He slowly lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen. "Stop her?" he whimpered. "Ellie, you don't understand. She's dangerous. A professional con artist. She'll ruin you too. She has no conscience." I met his gaze, my own eyes cold as ice. "She's already ruined me, Arthur. She's destroyed my marriage, betrayed my trust, jeopardized my son's future. I have nothing left to lose, and unlike you, I'm not afraid of her. She has a secret, and I have a plan." As if on cue, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was Detective Miller. The timing was almost poetic. "It seems," I said, looking from the phone to Arthur, who was now slowly pulling himself to his feet, "that Detective Miller has more news about Miss Sawyer. And I have a feeling it's exactly what we need." The call from Detective Miller was to arrange a meeting, not just with him, but with federal agents. When I relayed this to Arthur, his face, still pale from his confession, twisted into a plea. "Ellie, please let me come. I need to be there. I can explain. I can help." But I was firm. "No, Arthur. This is my fight now. You've done enough damage. Stay here and try to process what you've done." He protested, but my resolve was unshakable. I left him slumped in the kitchen chair, grappling with his guilt. I met Detective Miller in a nondescript government building, the kind designed to blend into the background, to avoid drawing attention. He led me into a sterile conference room where two figures were already seated. A poised woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, Agent Emily Hayes, and a stern-faced man with an air of quiet authority, Agent Ben Carter. They were FBI. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. Detective Miller began, his voice grim. "Mrs. Vance, we've done some more digging on Miss Sawyer. Your daughter-in-law, Serena, her alias, Elizabeth Sawyer, has a far more extensive and devastating criminal history than we initially suspected. We've confirmed victims across 3 states, and her operation spans almost a decade. She's stolen millions. Mrs. Vance, not just financially, but she's robbed people of their dignity, their futures." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "2 of her confirmed victims," he continued, his voice softer, "committed suicide after she left them. Others lost everything, their businesses, their homes, their families. She leaves a trail of complete devastation." My blood ran cold. Suicide. This wasn't just about financial fraud anymore. This was about lives utterly destroyed. The images of Julian Thorne's broken face flashed in my mind, multiplied by a chilling number of unknown victims. Agent Hayes then took over, her voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Vance, the FBI has been building a case against Elizabeth Sawyer for some time. She's incredibly elusive, meticulously covers her tracks, and often manipulates her victims into willingly signing away their assets, making it incredibly difficult to prosecute her for grand theft. What we desperately need is concrete evidence, something undeniable, from her own lips. We need her to confess," Agent Carter added, his voice deep, "to someone she trusts. Someone she believes is safe, someone who won't expose her." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I understood. My mind, quick and intuitive, immediately pieced together their unspoken request. They wanted me to wear a wire, to become the bait. Detective Miller met my gaze, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Mrs. Vance, what we're about to ask of you is extremely dangerous. Elizabeth Sawyer is a master manipulator, and she can be ruthless when cornered. There's no guarantee of your safety once she suspects anything." I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed on a folder Agent Hayes had placed on the table. It contained more photos of Serena's victims, their faces filled with despair, their stories echoing Julian's. Their haunted eyes stared back at me, a silent plea for justice. I thought of Liam, of Arthur, of the life Serena had threatened to obliterate. I had nothing left to lose. Agent Hayes leaned forward, her expression earnest. Mrs. Vance, Elizabeth Sawyer, under the name Serena, has a pattern of making her victims complicit. She twists their secrets, their desires, until they feel they have no choice but to go along with her schemes. That's why we believe you are uniquely positioned. How so? I asked, my voice steady despite the apprehension coiling in my gut. Because you discovered her true identity before the con was complete, Agent Hayes explained. You're not yet a full victim in her eyes, not entirely stripped of your resources. And crucially, she believes she still has leverage over you through Arthur. This creates a window of opportunity. Agent Carter elaborated on the plan. We want you to confront Serena, Mrs. Vance. Not with anger, not with threats, but with an offer. You'll tell her you're tired of your boring housewife life, that you've seen through her game, and that you admire her audacity. You'll offer to partner with her, to combine your knowledge of the Vance family finances with her cunning. The goal, Agent Hayes interjected, is to exploit her narcissism, to make her feel superior, powerful. She loves to brag about her past successes, her cleverness, the way she outsmarted everyone. If you play your cards right, she'll likely confess details of her past cons, her aliases, her methods, directly into our recording device. My stomach clenched at the thought of facing Serena, feigning admiration, inviting her into a false alliance. It would be a performance of a lifetime, fraught with peril. We will have you fully wired, Agent Carter assured me. Microphones, small cameras, and we'll have a surveillance team nearby, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. If at any point you feel threatened, or if the conversation takes a turn you're not comfortable with, you'll use a code word. Butterfly. Say butterfly, and we'll extract you immediately. I looked at the photos of the ruined lives, the faces of despair, 2 suicides, millions stolen, my own family teetering on the brink. There truly was no other option. My personal pain, my shattered trust, suddenly seemed insignificant in comparison to the scale of her depravity. This wasn't just about me or my family anymore. It was about justice for all of her victims. I met Agent Hayes' gaze, a fierce determination hardening my features. When do we start? I asked, my voice firm and unwavering. The game was no longer just about survival. It was about retribution. The next family dinner felt like a theatrical performance, and I was playing a critical role. Every fiber of my being screamed to expose Serena right then and there, to tear down her carefully constructed facade. But I couldn't. I had a part to play. A dangerous game to win. I forced a smile, refilled glasses, and engaged in polite small talk, all while my internal radar was hyper-alert, scrutinizing Serena's every move, every word. She was a master, I had to admit. Her compliments to Liam were effusive, almost cloying, yet delivered with such apparent sincerity that he basked in them. She subtly guided conversations, asking seemingly innocuous questions about our summer home, Liam's business ventures, the antique vase on the mantelpiece. I observed her, a cold precision settling over me, realizing she wasn't just making conversation. She was gathering intelligence, cataloging assets, mentally filing away every detail of our family's wealth. It was chilling to watch her operate, so close, so intimately entwined with our lives. Liam, bless his innocent heart, noticed my distraction. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem a little distant tonight." Serena, ever the sympathetic figure, chimed in. "Oh, Ellie dear, you do look a bit tired. Perhaps you should take a nice, long vacation. A cruise, maybe, get away from all the hustle and bustle here." Her eyes met mine, a subtle, almost imperceptible hint of a challenge. A silent suggestion that she knew I was onto her. And this was her way of trying to get me out of the way before I could cause trouble. I returned her gaze, letting a sliver of the steel I now possessed show through my polite smile. "Oh no, dear," I replied, my voice sweet but firm. "I couldn't possibly. There's far too much to do right here at home. Besides," I added, a deliberate pause, "I wouldn't want to miss anything important." Serena's smile flickered, a momentary tremor of annoyance or apprehension. She was sharp, She understood the subtle threat in my words. After dinner, as Liam helped clear the table and Arthur retreated to the study, Serena lingered in the living room, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ellie," she began, her tone laced with faux concern. "Did you notice Arthur tonight? He seemed stressed. More than usual. I hope everything's all right with him." This was my opening. I decided to test the waters, to see just how quickly she would bite. "Oh, Arthur has his moments," I said, waving a dismissive hand. "He can be so absent-minded sometimes. Just this morning, I was tidying up his office, and I found some old papers scattered on his desk. Legal documents, I think. Something about property transfers from years ago. Yellowed with age." They were. Serena's casual facade crumbled instantly. Her eyes, usually so calculating and composed, sharpened, a predatory glint replacing their feigned sympathy. "Oh?" she asked, her voice tight, a subtle eagerness now replacing the soft concern. "What kind of papers, Ellie? And how old, exactly?" "The Henderson deal." I knew she was thinking of it. I feigned vagueness, deliberately withholding details. "Oh, you know Arthur," I chuckled, a light, airy sound that masked my true intent. Always keeping old things. I didn't pay too much attention. Just a stack of documents from years and years ago. The paper was quite yellowed, like from decades ago, not just last year. I just filed them away. I watched her closely. A flicker of satisfaction when I saw her jaw tighten, her eyes dart from side to side, a clear sign of agitation. She tried to sound casual again, a strained lightness in her voice. "Right. Well, I'm sure it's nothing. Just Arthur being Arthur, I suppose." But her attempts at nonchalance failed spectacularly. She was clearly interested, clearly worried. Before she could press further, Liam reappeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Everything all right out here, ladies?" he asked, oblivious to the unspoken battle being waged before him. The moment, and my test, was over. Later that evening, after everyone else had retired, I found Arthur in the study, nursing a glass of scotch. He looked up, his face etched with worry. "How was dinner?" he asked, his voice low. Serena took the bait, I stated simply, ignoring his question. "I mentioned finding some old, yellowed legal documents about property transfers in your office." She reacted exactly as I expected. She's worried about the old records of the Henderson deal. She knows they exist, or at least she's terrified they might. Arthur's eyes widened, a dawning realization on his face. "This means she'll accelerate her timeline," he whispered, fear creeping back into his voice. "She'll try to get everything she can, as quickly as possible, before you can expose her." "Precisely," I confirmed, a grim satisfaction in my tone, "which means our window to act is narrowing. You know what you have to do." He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. "What?" "When I confront her, Arthur, you have to back me up," I explained, my voice firm. "You will tell Liam the truth about her blackmail, about the Henderson deal, about everything." His face paled further. "Liam? You want me to tell Liam?" "He deserves to know the truth," I retorted, without a trace of pity. "He deserves to know what kind of woman he married, and what kind of father he has. You caused this, Arthur. Now you have to help fix it." He looked utterly defeated, the weight of his actions finally crushing him. He paused, then asked, his voice barely audible, "Ellie, what about us? Our marriage, after all this? What will happen to us?" I looked at him, my husband for 42 years, now a stranger. The man who had betrayed me, endangered our son, and allowed a predator into our home. The anger, the hurt, the disappointment. It had all coalesced into a vast, empty void. "I don't know, Arthur," I replied honestly, the words tasting like ash. "I honestly don't know." The emptiness was profound. A chilling silence, where love and trust once resided. 2 days later, Agent Hayes called. "Everything is ready, Ellie," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "The recording device is tested, the cafe location is secure, And our team is in place. Remember the goal. Get her to talk about her previous cons. Make her feel like you're impressed by her cunning. My hands were shaking as I drove to the cafe. But beneath the tremor, an unfamiliar sense of power surged through me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control, steering my own fate. Serena was already there, seated at a corner table, shielded by oversized sunglasses, yet her posture betrayed a nervous energy. She had chosen a spot that allowed her to observe both the entrance and the street outside, a predator's instinct for escape. I walked calmly to the counter, ordered a black coffee, and then approached her table, letting the tension build in the silent space between us. I knew the FBI agents were watching, listening, every breath, every rustle, every word being captured. I sat down, placing my coffee on the table. Serena said nothing, her eyes hidden behind the dark lenses, her lips a thin, unsmiling line. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment, then laid my first card on the table. "It's about Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. Her mask, usually so impenetrable, shattered. Her lips parted, a gasp escaping, and I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated terror in her eyes before she quickly adjusted her sunglasses. "What about him?" she hissed, trying to regain composure, but her voice was tight with fear. "He's not dead, Serena," I stated calmly, watching her closely. "Marcus Thorne is very much alive, and he's been looking for you. For years." I paused, letting the information sink in, then delivered the final blow. "Which means, Elizabeth, that you're a bigamist, among other things." Using her real name was like striking a match. The air crackled. She was cornered, her usual avenues of escape blocked. I pulled out a small stack of photographs, images provided by Detective Miller and the FBI, and fanned them out on the table. "Julian Thorne wasn't your only victim, was he, Elizabeth? There was Robert Hammond, Matthew Collins, Theodore Grayson." I pointed to each man's photo. "All men you seduced, manipulated, and systematically destroyed." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Robert Hammond, who lost his entire life savings, his business, and then took his own life. Matthew Collins, who ended up in prison for fraud you orchestrated, while you walked away with his inheritance. Theodore Grayson, who had a fatal heart attack after you left him penniless and alone. Do you remember them, Elizabeth? The systematic destruction of human lives you've left in your wake." For a moment, she seemed to deflate, her bravado faltering, but then, a flicker of that cold, calculating pride returned. She pushed her sunglasses higher on her nose, a predatory glint in her eyes. "What do you want, Wanda?" she asked, using my birth name. A subtle jab. A reclamation of power. "I want in," I countered, surprising her, and even myself, with the conviction in my voice. "I'm tired, Elizabeth. Tired of the boring housewife life. Tired of watching Arthur's pathetic little affairs. Tired of pretending to be a doddering old woman. I've seen what you do, and frankly, I'm impressed by your brilliance." This was the delicate dance Agent Hayes had described. Feed her ego. Make her feel invincible. "You're good," I continued, "but you're sloppy. Marcus Thorne, blackmailing Arthur with those old documents? Those were careless moves for someone of your supposed caliber. You nearly brought down your whole operation just to settle a personal vendetta against Arthur for being, what? A reluctant accessory? A poor lover?" I saw a flash of anger at the criticism, but also intrigue. My honesty, however veiled, was disarming. Then, I delivered my fabricated lure. "My own trust fund, from my grandmother's estate, is worth $3.2 million. Untraceable, unburdened by family ties. What you're trying to squeeze out of Liam and Arthur, Elizabeth, is pocket change compared to what we could achieve together. Imagine what we could do with my money, your brains, and our combined knowledge of this city's wealthy elite." Her eyes, now fully visible as she had removed her sunglasses, gleamed with avarice. The mention of $3.2 million had clearly piqued her interest, making her current, riskier con seem small time. She was hooked. "Tell me about the others," I prompted, gesturing to the photos. Tell me how you did it. Every detail. And she did. Filled with a perverse pride, Serena recounted her exploits, her voice gaining strength, almost a swagger. She described in chilling detail how she had conned Robert Hammond, Matthew Collins, and Theodore Grayson. She rattled off names, dates, methods, bank accounts, how she had exploited their weaknesses, their loneliness, their greed. She admitted Julian Thorne was an exit strategy, a man she had planned to disappear from. But he had grown too attached, too possessive. So I faked my death, she declared, a smug smile on her face, with falsified police reports. A doctored death certificate. It was foolproof. Then came the truly horrifying revelation. Liam's business, his inheritance. She purred, leaning closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. That's the real prize. And Arthur, he was just a loose end. I was already planning his heart attack. A simple swap of his medication, easy enough to arrange. No one would suspect a thing. My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to maintain composure, to keep my expression one of impressed awe. Brilliant, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Absolutely brilliant, Elizabeth. So, I said, my voice still steady. The real prize. You've been playing a much longer game than I thought. I then pulled a recent newspaper from my bag, unfolding it to reveal a photo of Julian Thorne, alive and well, giving an interview about his search for justice. Funny thing about faked deaths, Elizabeth, I said, my voice losing its feigned admiration. They rarely stay faked for long. Julian Thorne isn't dead, and it turns out, the families of Robert Hammond, Matthew Collins, and Theodore Grayson are also very much alive. And they've been looking for you too. Her face went from smug confidence to utter disbelief, then dawning horror. The color drained from her face as two figures, Agent Hayes and Agent Torres, stepped out from behind a partition, their badges glinting. Another agent moved quickly to secure the exits. Serena's eyes darted from them to me, then back to the small, almost invisible device pinned to my blouse. Realization, stark and brutal, flashed across her face. Elizabeth Margaret Sawyer, Agent Hayes stated, her voice clear and authoritative. You are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, grand theft, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Serena stared at me, her face contorted with a hatred so pure and visceral it almost made me flinch. She had been caught, exposed by the very person she had dismissed as too stupid to notice. 6 months had passed since that day in the cafe, since Serena's world, and by extension, mine, had irrevocably shifted. I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment, a space that felt entirely my own, sipping a cup of herbal tea. My divorce from Arthur had been finalized quietly, without further drama. He had pleaded, he had begged for reconciliation, citing his fear, his foolishness, his love, but the years of his complacency, his ultimate betrayal, and his willingness to sacrifice our son for his own reputation had hollowed out any affection I once held. I chose myself. I chose peace. Liam was my anchor, my brightest spot in the aftermath. The initial shock and hurt of his wife's betrayal and his father's complicity had been devastating, but he was healing, growing stronger, forging a resilience I admired. Our relationship, once strained by the unspoken truths of his parents' marriage, was now rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and profound respect. One sunny afternoon, Liam visited, his face alight with an infectious energy I hadn't seen in him for years. "Mom," he exclaimed, "you'll never guess who called." Julian Thorne. My heart leaped. "And?" I prompted, eager for news. "He said they recovered nearly 60% of his money," Liam announced, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "And he started a support group for romance scam victims. He said it's growing, and he's helping so many people rebuild their lives. He asked if you might be willing to help out. Maybe share your experience, your insights." A warmth spread through me. It was a beautiful idea, a testament to resilience, a turning of pain into purpose. "I'd love to, Liam," I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips. That's a truly wonderful thing Julian is doing. You know, I continued, this whole experience, it's really made me re-evaluate things. I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe for criminal justice, or even psychology, understanding the minds of people like Serena, and helping victims like Julian. Feels right. Liam raised his teacup, mirroring my own. To new beginnings, Mom, he said, his eyes shining with pride. To all of us. We clinked our cups, the gentle sound a symbol of a future being rebuilt. Later, I found myself sifting through old photo albums, images of a life that felt both distant and intimately familiar. There were photos of Arthur and me, younger, happier. But even then, I could see a subtle distance in his eyes. A complacent air, but there were also countless moments of pure joy with Liam. Moments where my own strength, however latent, was evident. I wasn't just a wife. I was a mother, a woman with an identity beyond her marriage. As I closed the album, my laptop pinged with a new email notification. It was from Catherine Bennett, Theodore Grayson's wife. I opened it. My breath catching in my throat, Catherine wrote a long, heartfelt message, thanking me profusely for exposing Serena. You don't know what this means, Ellie, she wrote. For years, my children thought their father was a fool, that he had squandered our life savings on some reckless venture. Because of you, because you exposed her as the monster she is, I can now tell them the truth. He was a victim, not a fool. He was conned. You've given us back his dignity. Catherine then explained that Serena's sentencing was in 3 weeks and invited me to attend. She also asked if I would consider writing a victim impact statement. The old Ellie, the conflict-averse wife who smoothed over every rough edge, would have politely declined. But the new Ellie, the woman who had faced down a predator, saw it differently. It wasn't a burden. It was an opportunity to lend my voice, not just for myself, but for all of Serena's silent victims. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the federal courthouse, the crisp autumn air, a refreshing contrast to the knot of anticipation in my stomach. I was dressed simply, but with purpose. The media frenzy was intense, Serena's story having made national headlines, but I ignored the cameras, focusing on the task ahead. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. I saw Julian Thorne, his face still bearing the scars of his past, but with a new light in his eyes. Catherine Bennett sat beside him, her hand clasped with another woman, presumably the wife of Robert Hammond. The room was filled with faces, some defiant, some still heartbroken, all united by their shared experience with Serena. Then, she was brought in. Serena, in an orange jumpsuit, looked aged, hardened, stripped of her glamour. Her blonde hair was dull, her face etched with a bitter fury. Her eyes swept the courtroom, meeting mine for a brief, searing moment. Her gaze was filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. I returned her stare, unblinking. One by one, the victims and their families testified, their voices echoing with pain, anger, and the slow, arduous process of healing. Julian spoke with quiet dignity, Catherine with fierce protectiveness for her children's memory of their father. Each story was a fresh wound, a testament to Serena's cruelty. When my name was called, I walked to the stand, a quiet resolve settling over me. I hadn't prepared a written statement. I just spoke from the heart. For many years, I began, my voice clear and steady. I lived a life of quiet complacency. I believed that avoiding conflict was kindness, but I learned, in the hardest possible way, that being quiet in the face of evil isn't kindness, it's cowardice. I looked directly at Serena, who was now glaring at me. Elizabeth Sawyer didn't just steal money from her victims. She stole their sense of reality. She stole their ability to trust. She stole their futures, their dignity, and for some, even their lives. She is a parasite, thriving on the destruction of others. But what she didn't realize, I continued, my gaze sweeping across the faces of the other victims, is that some of us are stronger than we look. Some of us can rise from the ashes she left behind. We can rebuild. We can heal, and we can build something better. The judge delivered her sentence, 15 years in federal prison. As the gavel struck, a collective sigh of relief filled the courtroom. Serena was led away, her eyes finding mine one last time. In her gaze, I saw it, clear as day. Defeat. As I left the courthouse, the setting sun cast long shadows. I pulled out my phone. First, I called Liam, then my sister, who had been a quiet rock of support. Then, I opened my browser and pulled up the community college application page. I smiled. I was no longer the sleepwalking wife, oblivious to the deceit unfolding around her. I was awake. I was free. And I was ready for whatever came next. The phoenix, it seemed, had truly risen.